Bonsoir, mes amis. I hope you're having a very good Wednesday today. We are getting into Bill Hickok, Wild Bill, the folk hero of the American Old West, and known for his crazy stunts as a soldier, scout, lawman, cattle rustler, gunslinger, gambler, showman, actor, and his involvement in many famous gunfights. This one is very interesting to get into, and it is super interesting to see where this guy came from and his background and seeing where he would end up. So, without much further ado, let's get into Bill Hickok. Unauthorized celebrity biography of today, or the overnight fame achieved through social media, has nothing on what was published in Harper's New Monthly magazine in February 1867. The article took a plain man with an emerging reputation as a superior scout and sharp high shooter and turned him, at just 29, into an American frontier legend. True, even before the piece appeared, Wild Bill Hickok was no longer an obscure figure here and there. People had begun to pass round stories about him, the way they had told tales the previous couple of decades about the frontiermen Jim Bridger and Kip Carson. In the case of Carson, some of these stories, true or not, had been published, enchanting young men and boys. In the years to continue, there would be stories printed in dime store novels about Wyatt Earp, Jesse James, Bat Masterson, Buffalo Bill Cody, and a handful of other figures as the West was mythologized into an American Iliad. No single published piece catapulted a man into the American frontier more than George Ward Nichols' article did for Hickok. Harper's was a very high profile magazine, especially in the more populated eastern states where the literacy rate was much higher. Nichols may have cynically been trying to create a heroic character to sell copies, but most accounts suggested that he was genuinely enamored of Hickok. His embellishments were true as far as Nichols had his editors were concerned. Hickok did have real adventures in his life, including behind the lines Civil War spying and the McCannels and Tut gunfights. And he was a rather exotic figure in his features and the way he dressed and carried himself. He had exhibited an uncanny talent for gunplay and marksmanship, and add all this to the fertile imagination of a writer who could cash in on a sensational story and an outlet that offered that story to thousands of eager readers, and America had its first post war frontier star. The gunfight that made him famous began, well, all gunfights. I'm sure we have ideas of how they begin, but begin with the story and we'll see if you guessed how this one would start. The gunfight between Davis and Tutt, Wild Bill Hickok, on July 21st was to be recorded as the first quick draw duel on the American frontier. Hickok emerged as the most famous gunfighter on the frontier. When the duel was detailed in an article published 18 months later in Harper's New Monthly magazine, Hickok, not yet 30 years old, was catapulted from local folk hero to national legend, and thereby he became a marked man. During the ensuing decade, many men with six-shooters on their hips would measure themselves against Hickok legend, and a few would ponder the value to their own reputations by gunning him down. The duel took place in Springfield, Missouri. From the perspective of today, this town would not be considered part of the American West. But in 1860s, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska comprised much of the mid-American frontier. In July 1865, Springfield was one of the jumping off points for people heading west or beyond to what had been known before the Civil War as the Great American Desert. Springfield, Missouri held a volatile mix of settlers and adventurers heading west, gamblers, prostitutes, entrepreneurs looking for business opportunities, or on the run from creditors after their previous businesses failed, and soldiers, ex Union and Confederates alike. It was an exciting town for a man with no encumbrances and responsibilities, looking for card games and cheap liquor and other forms of entertainment. Hickok found all the adventures that lie in Springfield, Missouri, and also became fast friends with Davis Tutt. Somehow, Hickok and the man from Arkansas had become friends, or at least acquainted with each other in a friendly enough way, even though they had been on opposite sides in the just concluded war. A mutual love of gambling was enough to overcome any blue-gray obstacles and to resume that friendship. Tut, having been there longer and in this town amongst Southern sympathizers in Missouri, was well known in Springfield, and so any friend of Tut's was allowed and welcome to gamble in that town. They were viewed as sometimes like two peas in a pod. He is a noted scout, desperado, and gambler, reported Albert Barnetts, who led the 2nd Ohio Volunteer Cavalry stationed at Springfield, about Tut. Both had been in the habit of appearing in the streets with two revolvers strapped on their belts. Both had been intimate for years and had been gambling together. However, it soon became clear that the friends had another mutual love. Susanna Moore. She may have been waiting for the war to be over, and Hickok would perhaps settle down, even take up farming again. Whatever the thinking, Moore was waiting for him in Springfield when he arrived. This may not have been the welcome Hickok was wanting. He was a free man, with a thirst and an itch for gambling, and settling down in any capacity was not in the cards. If Susanna would be patient, or she could cohabitate until apparently, she was not so inclined. Moore was not scorned exactly, but she had different thoughts about their relationship, and when he didn't share them, she got angry. Turned out angry enough to take up with Davis Tutt, who possibly saw this as revenge for any dalliance Hickok had had with his sister. If you guessed correctly, I'm giving you a gold star. Hickok was content to let matters take their course and probably valued a drinking buddy and fellow gambler more than an ex-girlfriend, but Tut was looking for trouble. He not only refrained from being in the same card games as Hickok, but he gave money to other players underwriting an effort to clean Hickok out and presumably send him on his way. But what led directly to what turned out to be a historic gunfight was Tut's attempt to humiliate Hickok. Tut's plan for the exiling of his former friend had gone awry when Hickok beat the other players at cards. Worse, the money he raked in was as much Tut's as theirs. Frustrated, he told Hickok that he owed $40 from a deal to the men that had made on a horse. Right then and there, without argument, Hickok took that amount from his winnings and attempted to give the money to Tut. That was not enough to appease him. Tut then insisted that Hickok owed an additional $35. Quote, "I think you're wrong, Dave," Hickok said. "It's only 25. I have a memorandum in my pocket." The attempt to tamp down the tension that permeated the warm and smoky room failed. Tut insisted on the higher amount. The two men disputed the $10 difference. Suddenly, Tut stepped forward, reached out, and snatched Hickok's watch off the card table. This was not just any timepiece, but a Waltman gold pocket watch. Tut announced Hickok would get his watch when he paid a $35 ransom for it. Hickok was tempted to go for his guns, but the other men in the room were friends of Tut's, and they were armed. With a grin in the watch, Tut walked out. Soon after, Hickok was told that Tut intended to parade in public with the confiscated watch dangling from the pocket of his vest. Hickok seethed, and he retired to his room to make sure his 36 caliber Colt 1851 Navy revolvers were well oiled and loaded. Word spread fast in Springfield that there would be a confrontation the next day. On the morning of July 21st, there was Davis Tutt, strolling through the town square, sunlight glinting off the gold watch. By this point in his life, Hickok was no stranger to gunplay and people dying from it. Yet, when word reached him about Tut's performance, he did not go for his gun. He did approach Tut, but to negotiate getting the watch back. He was rebuffed. The day wasn't over, though. Late that afternoon, Tut was back in Springfield Town Square, brandishing the pocket watch. Witnesses noted that a few minutes before 6 o'clock, Hickok was observed entering the town square from the south. In his right hand was one of his Colt Navy pistols. By the time he had drawn to 100 feet of Tut, the latter was alone in one corner of the square, as townsfolk had rushed for cover in surrounding buildings. Dozens pairs of eyes watched the scene unfold. Dave, here I am, Hickok said. In one last attempt to avoid a fight, he holstered the pistol and advised, "Don't you come across here with that watch." A few seconds passed. Then Tut's hand jerked, and his pistol came with it. In a smooth, coordinated series of motions, Hickok lifted his Colt, balanced the barrel on his left arm, and pulled the trigger the same instant Tut tugged his. In an abrupt and hushed silence, the gun smoke was swept away by the evening breeze. Then Tut cried out, "Boys, I'm killed." He began to move staggering towards a courthouse. He got as far as a porch, then weaved back into the sun-baked, dusty street. He fell, and may have been dead before he hit the ground. The bullet had entered Tut's torso between the fifth and seventh ribs and struck his heart. Hickok watched the man die as he holstered his pistol. Immediately after he hit the ground, Hickok wheeled about to confront a group of the dead man's friends who had positioned themselves behind him. They had guns, and they were angry. However, they had also just witnessed a perfect performance by a cool-headed shootist. "Aren't you satisfied, gentlemen?" Hickok demanded. "Put up your shooting irons, or there'll be more dead men here." No one challenged him. Word would spread far and wide that Wild Bill Hickok was not a man to be trifled with when he had a gun. Worse, when he held two, because he could shoot as accurately with either hand. An arrest warrant for murder was issued, and 3 days after the town square duel, William Haycock was taken into custody. A magistrate reduced the sentence to manslaughter they reduced the charge to manslaughter, and they set bail at $2,000. On August 3rd, the trial began. Considering that Springfield had been more Tut's town than Hickok's, and that the deck was especially stacked, with the jury being stacked against him, and also having a lawyer, Colonel John Phelps, an Army officer from former Union military, probably didn't go well in Arkansas, a town in an area that was pro and leaning towards Southern sympathizers. All odds are going against him. However, witnesses testified during the 3 day trial that Hickok tried to avoid an armed conflict, and when it was inevitable, he had allowed Tut to draw first. Letting an adversary do that meant finding of self-defense was automatic. Still, the not guilty verdict the jury delivered after 90 minutes of deliberation was not greeted warmly. According to Captain Barnett's, Wild Bill has been released on bail. Public sympathy seems equally divided between him and his victim. A few of Tut's friends even made remarks about putting a noose around his neck. Wow. A noose around his neck. And all this, they were able to be friends. They withstood being on opposite sides. Civil War, Union, Confederate, they could put that aside and they were able to become fast friends. But a girl, his sister, pride, ego, manhood, that's a different story. We can disagree on a war, but oof, a girl, like, we can disagree, on war and still get along. But a girl, that's a little bit more difficult to put up with. In here, we mentioned that Tut, is, Confederate, is South. He's that kind of guy. He's the pro, slavery, pro what's going on. That's what he fought for. And Hickok grew up in an area where he is he's an abolitionist, he's against slavery and all that. And the way that he's still a gentleman. Throughout all of this, I would not have expected that Hickok would be such a gentleman or would try to keep his calm. Because it's rare that we think about the first, cowboy really gunfighter in the West. We wouldn't think that he can be a calm, cool, collected kind of man. But he is. And to understand why he would be a man who fighting from the Union or on the Union side and be an abolitionist, I have to give you a little bit of background of where he came from and how he was raised and what kind of man he is. And also, this will put into perspective this gentleman, of course, we know rugged, handsome, good looks, fighter, all that. The ladies are going to be into him. But the reason why the ladies are into him because he's a gentleman, but he's also capable of being a monster. He's not just going out there killing people. He gave his friend plenty of chances. He tried to do the right thing. He tried to let bygones be bygones. So he's able to control his inner monster. But if he does need to fight, he's going to win and he's going to be number one. And I don't see how a man like that can lose. Like, how can you lose with the ladies? You really can't. And I think that's what every woman in their minds, or the way that at least women are wired. This is this is why the bad guy wins. Because the bad guy is also a gentleman at times. The bad guy is not a complete asshole as he's always depicted in these movies. You wonder why ladies like the bad guys? This is why. But this gun right here, the Williamson Derringer 41 caliber, it looks so cool. I just like how the ending curves down underneath. If you guys are seeing that one right now, it's so pretty. And it looks like it's a single. It holds only one. Later on, I have more pictures for you. But while I have you here, if you're enjoying the show and you have a fun time and you like baby elephants playing, I need a heart and a subscribe, a follow. I need one of the above to help improve and also continue growing. So, hearts for baby elephants are needed. That's my public announcement. Moving on, let's get into his background and how he grew up. William, his father, Hickok's father, was also a sideline occupation that he had was abolitionist. The Hickoks had brought their anti-slavery slavery fervor from New England to Illinois. William went further than simply making speeches on Sunday. He offered his farm as a sanctuary stop on the Underground Railroad. This was potentially dangerous. While today Illinois is known as the land of Lincoln and the state most associated with the president who issued the Emancipation Proclamation, people on both sides of the issue lived there in the 1840s. Even those who did not support slavery as an institution could hold the belief that you didn't interfere with another man's property, whether it be land, possessions, or people. To the east of Illinois was Indiana, which would later host a rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. William worked local William, the father of Hickok, worked with the local Quaker families who were part of the Underground Railroad that extended deep into the South. As a child, James Hickok would at times enter the family barn to find frightened escaped slaves hiding there. Or they would be in second cellar under the house lined with hay that William had created for this purpose. Occasionally, William Hickok took them in his wagon with one or more of his sons, and having his sons in there would present an image above suspicion. Sometimes this didn't go as planned. One night, the Hickok wagon was fired upon by bounty hunters. William pushed James and his brother from the front seat into the bed of the wagon, where they lay atop the hay, the hidden slaves. The darkness of the night and William's knowledge of the terrain allowed him to elude the pursuers and deliver his cargo. Running the underground was a serious and dangerous undertaking. Provost marshals were allowed to reclaim slaves, and there were several men in the neighborhood who made the undertaking difficult as well. These were the kidnappers and bounty hunters. The bounty hunters returned the slaves to their former owners, and the kidnappers recaptured slaves and resold them. Howard estimated from what his grandfather, this being written by, kid in the family lineage, stated that his grandfather probably helped hundreds of slaves to their northern goal. This is the type of father that Hickok had, and the lessons, or perhaps, the good actions that he would instill or pass down to his son. Up to this time, when he was approaching his 18th birthday in 1855, the life of James Butler Hickok was free of legend. The combination of being an excellent woodsman and able to read and write well enough might be unusual at the time and place, but these were good qualities for a restless young man yearning for more adventure than the humble Homer could provide. According to a typical account, James, when about 16, was swimming with friends in a stream, and a local bully began picking on one of his friends. A young Hickok, described as always a defender of the weak, lifted the bully off the ground and tossed him into the water. Another account has it that around that time James had expressed a desire to venture west. He threw his boss into the canal after the man had mistreated horses. This was viewed as an early indication of Hickok's lifelong habit of interposing himself between the oppressed and the oppressor. In June 1856, a month after James had turned 19, he and his older brother Lorenzo set off on foot to St. Louis. Their first stop on their journey west, the brothers parted ways once they arrived in St. Louis. News that their mother was ill sent his brother back, and James booked passage on a steamer traveling to the Missouri River. As the years went on, Wild Bill was considered to be William B. Hickok, even though he always signed official documents using his true initials, J. B. Hickok, James Butler Hickok. Disembarked. So in June 1856, Bill Hickok disembarked at Leavenworth in Kansas. Though he was no longer accompanied by Lorenzo, his goal continued to be to find a good place to build a homestead, and the entire family could then relocate to Illinois. But he needed to find a job, so he would not dip into the homestead money Lorenzo had given him. Hickok couldn't help but be distracted by the turmoil in Kansas. Pro and anti slavery positions were being debated in churches, saloons, and street corners, and violence simmered barely below the surface. Sometimes it boiled over, as Hickok wrote his mother after 3 months in Kansas. Quote, I have I have seen, since I have been here, sights that would make the wickedest heart sick. Believe me, mother, for what I say is true. Trying to stay out of the fray, Hickok worked whatever jobs he could find. Having a strong constitution and years of farm work on his resume helped. He wrote his brother Horace in November. He had not made any progress toward finding a site for the Hickok homestead, but there had been no lack of experiences and observations. Quote, you wanted to know what was going on in Kansas? I looked ahead of me to where the roads crossed and saw about 500 soldiers going on, and I looked down the river and saw some nice steamers, and they were all going on, and that is the way with all the people in Kansas. They all are going on, I guess. They are going to hell. So you see, I have told you what is going on in Kansas. The wide open, albeit dangerous atmosphere of Leavenworth could be catnip for a handsome young man. The end of that letter to Horace implies that Bill was no stranger to alcohol or other vices, and Leavenworth may have offered plenty more opportunity. Now, I will tell you a few lies. I have quit swearing now. I have quit drinking, but tell Bill, Lorenzo, I have quit dancing, etc. I have quit chewing tobacco and don't touch any large beer, and I don't speak to the girls at all. I'm getting to be a perfect hermit. Oh, what a smart ass. I have quit tobacco and I've quit the girls as well. Do we believe him? No, we do not. No, we do not. Awesome. Key takeaways that I got from this one. Let's see. First is going to be Kansas and how we have free states versus you know we have the dark South going on here, pro-slavery versus, abolitionist. It's intriguing. It's intriguing to see how that would go on. It is said that when we are doing this, we're pushing out west and manifest destiny. The president at the time just when new states are coming about, they're like, okay, you figure it out. They just gave the state, permission to be like, You're neither." So part of you, some people agree with slavery, some people disagree with slavery, and this is the world that Hickok is going into. And from his childhood and the way that he was raised and his father, the way that he was raised with trying to help people, and they disagreed with, slavery, and he fought on the Union side. It is it is pretty cool that his upbringing was all that. And again, I would not have thought that. His letters home though, those got me. The letters home. The next thing that I really got from this, the big part was in his letters, he tries to be as, light as possible and skips over some of the gruesome details, I'm pretty sure. And how many of us do that with our families? How many men, I'm sure, men especially, like he's a restless spirit. He needs to go out. He needs to explore. He is a man who's got to go out there. And I'm that kind of like free spirit. I wonder you guys are like that kind of free spirit too, where it's like you can't help it. You need to do something. You need to work. And he was just one of those guys. No matter what, he would return and he would really be into his adventures out west, going and doing and trying, and that's just part of him. That's just part of his bones. But him hiding things and being polite and telling his family, not to worry about this and that. But the Kansas ways are so bad. Them tell you where these people are going. They're going to hell. There is like I don't know how to do any of this. They're just going to hell. But also, in the beginning, when he first went out at 19, again, he's not a hot-blooded, you know, like looking for trouble. He's not that. He is just wanting the first reason really was wanting to set up a better situation for his family, and his brother was supposed to help him, but his brother wasn't into that lifestyle as much as he was. Some people are like, I can do cool and slow down, and some people are like, I gotta go, and he's the I gotta go. And final part, Hickok falls in love for once. Love. Oh man. Love will be getting all of us in trouble. He falls in love. Mary Jane Owen is who this girl is. So many people that he encounters, we really can't keep track of it. But this was the first lady that he actually refers to as my gal. And, I went to see my gal yesterday and ate 25 years of corn to fill up with. Oh, you ought to be here and eat some of her biscuits. She's the only one I ever saw that could beat mother making biscuits. It's like, aw. Like, I, and he's kind of like a romantic, heartish kind of guy. Of course, don't be diluted. You will never be able to lock such a man down because it's just not his nature. I suppose some people are there for a season, if it is to be referred in the most polite way. Some people are there for a season, and he is simply that kind of man. Again, in the very beginning, a girl is the reason why he ended up getting in a fight with his mate. His mate is stupid. Again, that's just stupid. There's no reason. But I think maybe being overshadowed, him getting the glory, and we talked about his looks, we talked about how good he is. You could understand that even if the girl was the last tipping point, that this man would probably have people who are envious of him, and who would want to, given the opportunity, take him out of this world, run him out of town, or do whatever. And there are different sayings and different dalliances that will go on with different women, and that is to be expected. It's just it's just who he is. We can't separate the hero from the man. That's all I have for today. It's been fun hanging out with you guys. I will say au revoir, and I'll talk to you next time.